So let's move on to another awful, awful story that we have to talk about, unfortunately. This is the, again, horrific murder of Iryna Zarutska on a train in Charlotte, North Carolina. This is a Ukrainian young woman, refugee, going back home from a job in a pizzeria, sat on the train and is just stabbed in an unprovoked attack by the suspect, DeCarlos Brown Jr., slashes at her with a knife. She dies quite quickly from her injuries. He's recorded on the train, stalking the train, saying, "I got that white girl." Quite shockingly, no one around seems to intervene. Only at the very end, people get closer to us, kind of gawp and take a picture. There's a lot to unpack here, Rakib, but I guess a lot of questions are being raised about how was something like this allowed to happen. The suspect, who remains a suspect until he's found guilty, but everyone's seen that footage, he had, as is often the case in situations like this, a rap sheet as long as his arm, clearly serious mental health problems, and yet particularly in the kind of wake of a lot of defund the police or kind of racial equity policies introduced across America, increasingly you're seeing people like this left out on the streets for fear of the statistics looking bad. If another African American gentleman, as he was kept behind bars or kept in an institution where he couldn't harm anyone. So does this raise questions about the way in which Americans and even refugees are not being kept safe because of some of the crazy policies that have been pursued?
Oh, absolutely. But I think that for many people, the most remarkable thing about this horrific incident was the fact that it took place on the 22nd of August. It took a very long time for it to receive mainstream attention. I think much of that is because the sort of mainstream progressive-leaning media in the United States, it was clear that they didn't want to touch this with a barge pole. They didn't want to cover this at all. And I think that there's a broader problem here that when it comes to the sort of political liberal left, and I'm including the media ecosystem in that, how they react to horrific acts of violence are heavily dependent on the racial background of the victim and the perpetrator. And I think that when we've seen this sort of oppressed black and then white oppressor paradigm, which is very much at the heart of BLM-inspired racial identity politics, I think this particular incident where you have a female Ukrainian refugee, just 23 years of age, being killed on public transport by, who is, let's be blunt here, an African-American career criminal. He had, I believe, 14 prior arrests and also well-documented mental health issues. This entire incident is an inconvenience to their racial worldview and how society works. And I think there's also a point to be made here that certain people, they just simply cannot be rehabilitated. They cannot be reformed. Now, that might be because of their character, their appetite for violence, and indeed their mental health problems. They need to be separated from mainstream society. We have a situation here where a refugee, a young female refugee, fled war-torn Ukraine. She searched for safety in the United States, a country she reportedly adored, and then she was killed on American soil. And I think that raises very important questions in terms of how people approach matters of law and order. And I have to say that in the aftermath, as this incident has gathered more attention, has received more attention, I think some of the responses have been absolutely remarkable. People talking about how white men also kill women. I don't think anyone's ever questioned that at all. But I think it really shows that how much race just factors into people's thinking when analysing and indeed examining these kind of situations and other types of situations too.
And Francis, what did you make of this horrible story?
Do you know, I love America. For twice a year, I go out with trigonometry, myself and Constantine, and we conduct interviews in America, across America, whether it's in Texas or in California, New York, Tennessee, wherever it may be. And one of the things, American society has got a lot to recommend it, by the way, and I have a great deal of affection for the people and the culture and the society. But one of the things that never fails to horrify me when I'm there is the homelessness problem. The homelessness problem out there is so extreme. The drug addiction. When you see homeless people and you just simply walk past them, it's just so clear that these people are profoundly unwell. They should not be on the streets. they should be in a secure unit where they can be looked after, because they cannot look after themselves. And the vast majority of them pose a real danger to themselves. Now, unfortunately, what you also have is a small minority who pose a danger to others. But unless you tackle this issue, unless you tackle this problem, unless you actually look to get people off the streets, do your best to actually treat them, whether it's for their drug or alcohol addictions or other types of mental health problems, then this type of horrific murder is going to happen again and again and again and again. This is a failing of the system. It is awful. The really, really worrying thing is that this doesn't surprise me. I'm just surprised it hasn't happened more often in America, if I'm being honest.
And Rakib, should we talk a bit about those bystanders? Because people, having watched this footage, and I think that footage has been doing the rounds far too much than is actually comfortable, to be honest. There's a bit of purient interest these days, similar with the Charlie Kirk shooting. For whenever something like this happens, people feel the need to see it. But in the same way, the people who were in that train car kind of did just gawp or not get involved. You see the clips, people are kind of just hastily picking up their stuff and trying to get out of there. Understandable on some level, but you would think that at least some people would try and intervene, comfort her in her final moments. As I say, you only really see two people approach, one to take a picture and the other one just to kind of gawp at her slightly. I mean, that surely says something about the way in which we are sort of coming apart as in Western societies.
Oh, no, absolutely. And I think that when I've watched the footage, and the word I would use to describe some of the passengers was that they were apathetic, at best, really. The thing for me, which was particularly shocking, was the fact that she wasn't killed instantly. There was that part where she was just in a state of shock, and she was horrified by the situation. And there was a period of time where no one even approached her, didn't even see if she was okay, to comfort her in any way, shape or form. Those are the signs of a truly broken society, in my opinion. And I think that it's just it's a terrible shame that a young lady, she fled Kremlin militarism, left her war-torn country of Ukraine. And then she would have arrived in the US with such a sense of positivity, hope and optimism. And then for her to be brutally killed in such a way is deeply saddening. And I think in terms of the reaction of passengers there, I think I'm worried being too judgmental, because I have to be honest, I've never been in that kind of situation, if truth be told. But I just think that the basic human decency would be at least to approach her and comfort her. But I just think that there was such a gap until any individual did that. I think that's deeply concerning, and I think it provides a real insight into how, in much of the West, how that there has been that social breakdown in that sense, and how there has been that erosion of what I'd consider to be basic human decency.
And Francis, what do you make of that aspect to it, the bystanders in that footage?
I think there could be that part to it, as Rakib says. I also think as well, look, let's approach it from a human and compassionate point of view. I'm sure that those people were in shock. Imagine if you were on the train and something like that happened. Would I run over? I don't know if I would. Or would I just sit there completely blindsided by what I'd just seen? Charlie was murdered yesterday. I don't think I behaved in a particularly, in a manner that was particularly, that I would have behaved, shall I just say. I'm still in shock. I'm still processing it. It's affected the way I am today, the way I've interacted with people, maybe the way I've conducted interviews. I think when an event or an incident of that extremity happens in front of you, I think a lot of people go into shock because they're struggling to process what they've just seen. It's so grotesque and extreme. It's almost impossible to react in the moment. I'm sure some people did, but I'm very sure also that a vast majority of people would be left stunned by that horrific killing which just happened in front of them.
No, it's a very fair point.